No offense to any of the previous guests or previous episodes of College Football Forecast, but we may have finally reached the pinnacle. We may need to essentially take everything we've done and throw it onto a funeral pyre and maybe retire after the end of this particular one. Not to put too much pressure on Alex M. Brown, but I am sure, one, because he's one of the best at what he does anywhere in the country, as he is the general manager and director of player, not recruitment. God, it'll come back to me.
Personnel.
Oh, I knew I was going to do that. I had it the first time. I feel really awful. Oh, that was embarrassing. Yes, personnel. That's what it is. The broadcast, the whole podcast he does. God, woo. Okay, it will not be the best episode we've ever done. Well, that pressure is off, Alex M. Brown, because I have already booted an easy lighter into right field. So, having recovered like the professional I am, he is one of the best at what he does. I may not be, but he is one of the best at what he does. I have known him since he was a high school senior, telling me he would one day be the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys. And he might one day be right. But we're going to get into a little bit about that. But mostly we're going to talk about the AAC, SMU, where it fits into that conference and maybe other conferences, ? And then obviously we're going to spend most of our time talking about the player evaluation process, the players that he likes best in his program and maybe other programs that he'll be facing in the AAC. And the last but not least, the future/present of recruiting and how things like COVID-19, social media, ahistorical young people, of all those things affect what he does. So you expressed some concerns. We both have been digging into the SMU roster and obviously looking even at the spring game and things like that. You had questions/concerns. And let's get into it, because you wouldn't be you if you didn't have criticism or concerns.
That is true, and I have been following the SMU program for quite a while, almost at this point 15 years, I would say. That's how long I've been following the Mustangs. And the reason why is because, as a lot of you guys know, I was born in Hawaii. I'm a big University of Hawaii Warriors football fan, and when I was growing up, it was June Jones of the Run and Shoot. After he left Hawaii, June Jones went to SMU to revitalize that program with the run and shoot up there. Eventually, they would go on to have Sonny Dykes there as head coach, where they would run a very pass-heavy offense. And now they're his second year of Rhett Lashley, who coming over from Miami, who runs a very up-tempo passing offense. Now, when you hire a guy like Rhett Lashley, because obviously Sonny Dykes went on to TCU, you're looking for hopefully a scheme replacement, because they kind of run very similar offenses. They really love to move the ball via the air. And if we're being frank about it, SMU didn't really live up to expectations last year, and they did lose some talent in the portal. Now, looking at the team in 2023, they do have some excellent talent all over the field. They got 3 senior wide receivers that I'm very excited about. They have a wide receiver room that I'm actually very excited about. And they've produced NFL quality wide receivers in recent years. They brought in Jalen Knighton from the University of Miami, who I think is a stud running back. They have some really nice defensive pieces. But when you're looking at the game film from the spring game, it's clear that those quarterbacks are missing missing passes over and over and over again, and that is cause for some concern. Now, as I've mentioned in our close conversations, there's a lot of times where defenses will be a lot better because they're going against these guys every single day. So they're watching these plays happen over and over again. And when SMU goes and plays Louisiana Tech, a game in which they're an 18-point favorite, we could see a different story. I think the quarterback position is something we really want to emphasize on, especially in this new era of the transfer portal, where it seems like every team is getting a new quarterback every single year. Even SMU being on both the giving and taking side of it, having brought in Tanner Mordecai from the University of Oklahoma, and then obviously watching him leave to Wisconsin. I cannot wait to bring our guest on, talk about, how do you replace players at the high rate at which college football programs have to do, and what is that process looking like to see who is our next QB1, our next RB1, and how can we assemble a roster that's going to compete at the highest level this upcoming season.
Well, Brock, your wish is my command. So now that you've done trashing his efforts to fill in an important position at the program, I want to make it clear that the positions, thoughts, feelings of my co-host are his own and his own only. They do not represent Team MBS. They do not represent Bill Carroll or really anyone else, anywhere on the planet. But with that having been said, as Brock likes to say, I bring on my good friend, and really is someone I have come to admire as not just a person, but as a professional, and I think the future of his profession, Mr. Alex M. Brown. Hello, Alex.
Bill, appreciate you having me on. It was funny. I was talking to my assistant director of college scouting. I was like, I'm about to hop on this radio show, so just give me a second. And he's like, oh, cool. Who's it with? And I was like, well, it's like my best friend that I've never actually met in person, but we've been really close friends for over 10 years. So
well over.
If that makes sense.
I think we're approaching 14 because you were.
It was 2010. So now we're going on 13 years.
13. Okay, going on 13.
Talking ball, talking prospects, talking draft, all that. And I honestly, Brock, like the analysis is really pretty good because we have to ask those questions ourselves. Like at the end of a season, like, okay, what are the holes? What are the future holes? Like, what is the attrition going to lead to? And like, who's replacing that person? Is that person on the roster or is it not already? So that was actually some good insight. So I won't completely like. I'm not taking it as a trashing, Bill. Like that's called analysis. So appreciate you guys for having me on.
And that's why I appreciate you, sir, because you're not letting the babyface assassin is Brock's nickname, and you may eventually find out why before the show is over. But I appreciate you being so understanding. I'm going to let Brock ask me questions because he's young and eager, and then I have a few I'm going to ask myself. So Brock, fire when ready, young friend.
Yeah, so first off, I want to say thank you, Alex, for coming on the show. I know you guys have a busy schedule getting ready for the season, and that's what it's all about. It's not really a trashing; it's just having honest football conversations. And even though I talked about the quarterback situation, I love the roster that SMU has, especially on that offensive line. You guys got some absolute bullies on there, some older guys. Ja'Kai Clark is someone that I am absolutely in love with. But kind of going forward, you guys finish the season. You guys unfortunately lose your bowl game to BYU. You start that off season. Well, I guess even before that, ending the conference schedule and then having that lull into bowl game and then obviously into the off season. There's a lot going on in the office from the recruiting side. We've always talked about now with the transfer portal, guys like you need to be able to make decisions. The term general manager from a guy outside of college football, or at least not in the building, seems kind of odd compared to the term general manager in the NFL. But we're seeing a lot of transition and turnover every single year, and teams revamp themselves constantly. We're seeing it on an even bigger level with the Colorado Buffaloes. When it comes to your perspective, what do you look at in terms of how you are going to maintain, upkeep, and revitalize your roster year to year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to go back, so there's a couple of things laced in there. So yes, that period from the end of the season to the start of the bowl game is absolutely insane because for us, typically throughout the season, we're evaluating high school film, junior college film, and we're also evaluating college players from across the country because the portal window keeps it closed through basically the entire season all the way up into December. And we have to have our evaluations ready for whoever enters the portal, if they do or if they don't. So essentially, you kind of are you're setting the parameters of what you're looking for, and throughout the year, and as you see your team develop and adjust, you'll say, okay, these are the needs we have transfer wise. This is where we're going to attack high school wise. And it's such a fluid, moving target that once that window opens, you have to have flights ready. You have to have coaches in position to go and meet with these players because of the contact period, and you need to get face-to-face interaction. You have essentially a 24-hour window of pulling the trigger, because if you wait any longer than that, somebody has already hopped on that train. Somebody has already called the kid and offered him a scholarship and said, hey, I want you mid-year. I want you now. So it's I always joke about it with our staff. The transfer portal is more so like a job on Indeed.com. So if a job is posted, what do you normally think? There's two things that pop in your mind. Is it open, and am I a candidate, right? So for us, like, all right, has the decision been made on where that kid wants to go already? That happens all the time, and we have to be prepared for that. So if we wait any longer, there's going to be 4, 5, 6, 7 more teams in front of us in line. So you want to make sure you get your place in line. And then the second thing that we always talk about is that, okay, on Indeed.com, you pull it up, you're looking for a job. If it says 30 plus days on it, what is your first thought, Bill?
what's wrong with this job?
What's wrong with this job? So that's the same thing that happens in the portal. If a kid is in there for more than 30 plus days and he hasn't committed anywhere, what is my first thought? What is wrong with this kid? No offense to the kid, but people do their homework as well. So those are some things kind of that go through our mind during that process. We have to make sure we see our commitments from a high school standpoint, because this is the last time we can see them before the December signing period. So we were flying all over the country. We were up late at night on the phone, evaluating players. Jeremiah and our scouting staff were evaluating every single player that hit the portal. So they didn't miss a guy from December all the way through the end of spring. So back to the last question you said, where, how do you manage kind of college football recruiting in today's landscape? I think it takes a village. Like, there are two distinct operations that happen in a recruiting department, and there's basically the prospecting, so the finding of the talent, the identification, the evaluation, and the connection and closing of the prospects. So there's truly like a scouting department and a recruiting wing, and the recruiting wing honestly serves as like your sales team, because every single day, if you're not getting your brand out there, if you're not making contact with the kid, if you're not getting somebody on campus and having a really good experience, it doesn't matter how good of an evaluation that you have on the kid. It doesn't matter what you know. You're not going to get them, because they have to say yes to us versus us saying yes to them. So that's the recruiting side. And on the scouting side, it's changed, because instead of, well, if the kid wants to transfer to you and you get the other team to sign off on a transfer waiver and he's a graduate transfer, then we can look at him as a transfer. It's like, no, like constantly you have to treat those transfer windows as free agency periods of, okay, as we go through the calendar year, we're keeping tabs on which positions we need to have immediate help with. Or if we miss out on a high school kid, now let's start to build our transfer pool of potential young guys that have eligibility. When they transfer us, they cannot leave until they graduate. So I think it definitely creates an NFL mindset of draft versus free agency. And that's kind of how you have to attack your roster, of knowing where the gaps are. So when I say gaps, like, okay, I had Tanner Mordecai leave, and then the next quarterback is Preston Stone. At the time was a redshirt freshman. The quarterback behind him is a true freshman, Kevin Jennings. So we knew heading into this offseason that we had a hole in terms of like a truly like older guy, but we believe in Preston as a talent. He's the highest rated recruit in SMU history. It's the first time they've ever signed a true 4 or 5-star guy since really the 80s. And just a guy who is a true leader, a guy that the team follows and believes in, really has a motivating personality and a ton of talent. So we said, let's go make sure that we have a really good backup quality reserve that's played in big time games and can be a great influence in the room and help develop. So you're really like, all right, where can I find Chase Daniel in the transfer portal? Where can I find Ryan Fitzpatrick in the transfer portal? And we went to Iowa and got Alex Padilla, who he wasn't a full-time starter there, but he was a full-time backup for the last 2 to 3 years. And in the 4 games that he started 2 seasons ago, he led them to a Big Ten championship game. So it's one of those situations like, okay, this guy can win when his number's called. He's extremely intelligent. He's extremely smart football-wise, and he's going to pick up our system fast. So that's kind of how you have to approach it. Draft versus free agency is what we like to say. So high school scouting, we have a wing of people for that. And transfer scouting, we have a wing of people for that. So high school wise, like it's so much more projection. Like you have to look for traits. You're looking for the makeup so that when he gets on campus, he hasn't hit his ceiling yet. Because if he has, he's not going to do much for us other than probably be a backup or reserve, right? You want that arrow pointing straight up. So we hired a director of high school relations named James Brown, who has really just about 30 years plus in the state of Texas, but more so 25 plus years in the DFW area of coaching at a high level. Led his high school team, Mansfield Timberview, last year to a semifinal appearance. And he's been in the playoffs the last 3 years in a row. And like, he was a guy who turned around a new program and built them into a winning program, churned out a ton of college level players, NFL players. And I had worked with his son at Houston, who his son is now coaching special teams at Michigan. So for James, he is our liaison to the high school coaches. He is the person that, when scouts go on the road and they're gathering background information, like he's gathering that background information on the high school prospects, whereas Jeremiah Waite, who came over from West Virginia, is covering our college side. So I like to think that we cover all our bases when it comes to that, and we've got really good people in place. On the high school recruiting side, we've got Danny Wesley that works with our defense. He's been a Dallas guy through and through. And Tyler Foster on the offensive side, he was the associate DPP at Baylor just a year ago, and has been at 3 different Big 12 schools. He's coached high school ball in Texas. So makes a lot of sense when you kind of take a step back and say, why would I not have a high school scouting wing, a college scouting wing, and an entire recruiting wing for the sales and on-campus operational side of it? So long-winded answer, but you gave me a good loaded question, like a jalapeno popper. So
there we go. I couldn't help but sort of chuckle to myself when you said, where can I find Ryan Fitzpatrick at the collegiate level? It almost felt like a setup for a Bo Nix joke. But I will move on because you are a professional and we can't make jokes like that anymore.
Yes.
I will.
Do you know how hard it was to bite my tongue? Mr. Brown mentioned Iowa and Padilla. So it brought back a lot of memories. But I have been fortunate enough, Alex, to grow up kind of alongside the evolution of scouting. And when I first got into college football, a recruiting trip was you go to the program, you check it out, you walk around with a player, you get a bite to eat, and then you talk to a coach. Recruiting now is like walking the red carpet. And you talk about that sales team, and we always see it every year with every program. Who has the cool photo shoot, the cool stuff? You put on the jerseys, the helmets, all that good stuff. What is that like for you in terms of how do you set it up? How do you set up a recruiting visit for SMU to be successful in recruiting a player?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the main thing is making every time you hear a kid say why they chose a school, typically, I would say 9 times out of 10, they say it felt like home. So it really comes down to knowing the kid before he gets on campus. And most of the time, everybody wants the hype. They need something to put on social media, because even if the kid doesn't go to your school, if you have really, really good content from the kid's visit and he puts that on social media, every other kid in the country is going to see that, because these kids are all interested in what's happening at these visits. So that's what's cool about social media. That's also what's hard, because then that stresses a lot of people in our world. So we have a great creative team, Alex Eisenbrenner and Matt Schumacher, Ethan Wagner. They're all from big programs, Oklahoma, Missouri, Michigan. Matt has been here for a long time. He was with the previous staff as well. And from the photo side, from the graphic side, from the video side, like you can even do video shoots now with these guys. That's a big component of it. So it typically takes like an hour out of the entire visit. And you got to kind of build the visit around that because of the operations that go behind it. But again, back to what I was saying at the start of the answer, you have to really make sure you know what the kid is interested in. What are his focuses? And if you don't know, you have to really give them a good overlay, because you want to give them reasons to come back. I think what a lot of people make a mistake of is shooting their entire cannonball and you have nothing left in the reserves when the kid comes back, and you're just repeating a visit. You're just repeating going through the same motions, showing the same part of campus. So you got to do a really good job of kind of creating a timeline, and really you're able to tell the story of what your program is and how you can answer the questions that they have or the concerns they have. The thing that we try to focus on is never being a negative recruiting team. Like, if we don't have enough good things to talk about ourselves and we have to talk negatively about another program, that probably means that the kid shouldn't come here and wouldn't come here. So we really believe that because we're Dallas's exclusive college football team, that we're in one of the top 3 media markets in the country. We have one of the best alumni bases in the country in terms of people that actually support our program and support our players. And we have a history of winning, and we have a coaching staff that has done it at a high level. We feel like we can check every box off. So the way we structure a visit is making sure that they get around the right people. So if that's quarterback that needs to know and feels confident about how he fits in our offense, we're going to spend a lot of time with Coach Lashley and Coach Johnny Brewer and Coach Woods, so that he has a good feel for what we do offensively. We're going to talk ball, and we joke about it. If a kid says no to you because of the food that you serve or because of the barbecue that we selected, we probably are looking at the wrong kid. So a lot of those kind of things get vetted out early in the communication process. But that's what I would say the most is once you know the kid well, is tailoring the visit to those guys.
Absolutely. And you brought up a great point. We talk about having those conversations with Coach Lashley and the rest of the staff. Now, as a head coach, he's no longer just focused on X and O's. He is the CEO of the program. At least that's what the role of head coach has expanded to. What do those conversations look like between you and Coach Lashley in terms of building a competitive roster?
That's probably the coolest part is I haven't told many people this, but when I came and interviewed for the job last year, I didn't even know what the position was I was interviewing for. I was a director of scouting last year. I didn't get promoted until this past offseason, but I didn't know if I was going to be director of recruiting, player personnel, scouting. I didn't know what it was. And you prepare for an interview and you have a presentation and a PowerPoint and you're going to go through X, Y, and Z slide. And I show up and it's me and Coach Lashley and we're sitting at the conference table and we literally just had a conversation for about an hour and 20 minutes of high level things, kind of micro level, like very specific things as far as how we see evaluating, how we see the future of college football, how we would want to do recruiting together. And just the way we're able to dialogue, kind of have a back and forth conversation on sometimes I'll disagree with him and sometimes he'll disagree with me, but we're able to always be on the same page. That's what makes my job easier. So typically in season is different than out of season. In season, so we'll always meet in the middle of the week right before he goes on his radio show. So we'll have like a 2-hour time block and we'll go over everything from who do we have coming in on campus that upcoming week, who he needs to get on the phone with. I'll pull up players on film. We go over the roster. We talk over the numbers. And I think what people on the outside don't realize is how quickly your needs on a roster can change, whether that be a player flunks out of a class or somebody gets homesick or somebody gets injured and it's an injury that is going to be 6 months or more. Like literally, like, what if somebody cuts his hand right before fall camp? How are you going to backfill that slot? Or from a walk-on standpoint, how many numbers are you trying to bring in? And how much of that is influenced by how many lockers you actually have, not necessarily just how many roster spots. So we talk through everything high level to low level. And what's good is that we have this constant feedback and this feedback loop of how our team is doing, how we feel about the progression of our players, how we feel about the players that are on our board, and then the attack plan of like actually going and getting them. So that's about once a week. We text every day. We're always regularly talking recruiting. I think it's like shaving. Like if you skip a day, okay, whatever. You skip a week, you'll notice it. You skip a month, you're in trouble. And then you skip a year and you look like Russell Crowe, and you've got Wilson in your hand. So I think Coach Lashley is doing a phenomenal job here, and I absolutely love working for him.
Absolutely, and that's a great segue into what I want to talk about next, which is about the 2023 season. Now, recapping 2022, SMU went 7-6. They did have a bowl loss, but they were ranked fourth in the American Conference. Two out of the three teams above them are gone. I believe those teams are Houston and UCF. They went to the Big 12, so realistically, they take those away. SMU's in the conference championship game, possibly playing Tulane. What steps have you guys taken to improve off of last year and make yourselves a competitive program?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing is like we are so beyond excited about Preston, but the fact of the matter is like Tanner Mordecai started a ton of games here and set records. And he was a guy who was really, really consistent and set the tone. So like that is a big loss. At the end of the day, like we feel really good about the direction we're going though, because of all the guys that we brought in, like the aggregate. And it's funny how it worked out this year. We lose Rasheed Rice. Obviously, Rashee Rice, a second round pick. He's projected to. He's had a really good camp so far with the Chiefs. He's probably going to have a big role with them. We're fired up for him. He was an incredible leader, player, all those things. But it reminded me of the Moneyball scene when they're in the draft room and Billy Bean says, "All right, guys, what's the problem?" And everybody's looking at the board and they're like, "Well, uh, we lost Eric Chavez and we lost Johnny Damon." And like, "No, what's the problem?" He's like, "Well, we got to get this, this, and this." "No." "Well, we were last in this, this, and this." "No." It's like, we have this many runs to replace. We have this many hits to replace. We have this many stolen bases to replace. These are the numbers we have to replace. And the way in Moneyball, they looked at it in the aggregate of, okay, I can't replace this one player just binarily. I can't just go find another Rashee Rice. That's not going to happen. But what I can do is I can get Jordan Hudson. I can get Jordan Curley back healthy. I can get Jake Bailey back healthy. I can get Romello Brinson from Miami. I can get Keyshawn Smith from Miami. I can get Roderick Daniels back. And now, instead of having a receiving core where it's like 2 or 3 guys, there's like 8 or 9 guys that could destroy any defense in this conference. So that's what I'm really excited about offensively. And you talked about it on the offensive line. That is probably one of our most deep positions just because every single player in the 2 deep is ready to go. You've got 6'7" and 6'7" at left tackle and right tackle, really athletic. One's coming from the SEC. One has already been a longtime starter and he was the 3rd highest rated pass protector, Marcus Bryant, that is, in our conference. The sky's the limit for him. He's really talented. PJ Williams transferred in from Texas A&M. He's a guy that can play all 5 positions. He did a little bit of snapping at Texas A&M. He could play right and left tackle. He's played guard. He's super talented. The interior comes back, and we bring in Logan Parr from UT, Ja'Kai Clark from Miami. Both those guys who started games. And you look at Branson Hickman in the middle, he's been the staple of consistency, and in my opinion, was the most consistent guy last year on the offensive line, just down in, down out. And the last player that I'd even name who may be the most talented of every single one of them is Justin Osborne, who's a consensus preseason all-conference player, was an all-conference guy last year, transferred in from Auburn. So that's how I feel offensively. And then, like, just from a defensive standpoint, we knew heading into the offseason that our back end was really important to improve. We struggled against the pass, covering the pass. So we brought in 2 longtime starters, Charles Woods from West Virginia, Chris Meganson from Liberty, get in another guy, Jalen Davis Robinson. He's called Smoke because he had like a 10.27 100-meter time. Free guy, 6 foot plus. He's got like salivating talent, like NFL ability. And that doesn't even include Jahari Rogers, who's a returning starter, who is a 4-star guy, super, super talented. Katie Hall, another really long and talented guy. Like, the whole room is talented. It's just a matter of getting the right mix of them. And then in the back end, probably the most valuable transfer pickup, Jonathan McGill, just from a team leadership standpoint, the experience that he has, the maturity. He entered our program mid-year, and he's best friends with Preston Stone. So now you have like a real connecting group of leaders offensively and defensively. And you see that crossover where everybody on the team is tight with everybody. And that's something that Coach Lashley has harped on a ton is, okay, we brought in all these talented players. Like, how do we take it from just being a good collection of talent to a team? And I think we've done that by the type of people we brought in. So I kind of got long-winded. I don't even remember what the question was, but I'm excited about our guys.
Don't worry, I don't remember the question was either, but you answered it, and even more so. No, I am loving this roster in terms of the names of the ball, especially on the defensive side of the ball. You saw in the spring game, not only they were a great defense, but just effort that they put into every single play. You almost started salivating as well. However, you do have an inclusion of a team in the same state, now to your conference, UTSA, who is known to light up the scoreboard. Frank Harris is coming back at quarterback. Jeff Traylor is one of the most notable high school to college coaches around it right now. how do you guys anticipate their inclusion affecting the makeup of the conference?
Oh, it affects it a ton. I think they're one of the best in the state of Texas of connecting with the high school coaches, of uncovering every rock. Joe Price, their receiver coach, is one of my good friends, and he's one of the best recruiters that I know because he is so tied in, not just in the Houston area but throughout the state. So I think they do a phenomenal job. What you notice about that team is like their belief and their effort. If you've watched any of their games, like they're in a lot of close games where they finish and they find a way to win. It's not always pretty, but I actually had a chance to recruit Frank Harris when I was at Houston. We had a junior day, and Sam Ellinger was there, Frankie Harris was there, and Clayton Tune was there.
Oof.
So you had three guys who wound up being 4-year plus starters. And Sam was already committed to Texas. He was with a teammate, but seeing like Frankie Harris's personality and how he carried himself, and he was such a professional, and like just how he carried himself and his, you can really get a feel for like the leadership of a kid when you spend more and more time with him. It was unfortunate that he tore his knee up his senior year in high school, tore his knee again later in college. But what he's overcome and the type of productive, experienced, consistent playmaker that he is, it'll be fun to watch him. Obviously, we don't have them on the schedule. Would love to see them in the championship against us. I think that would be really awesome. Big fan of what they do, and I'll be curious to see how they make the transition, because Conference USA is a good conference. I spent 3 years there. I've also spent 4 years in this conference with UH, and I've spent another year here. And I think the jump is a lot, from a interior standpoint and from a speed standpoint. So I'm interested to see how, from a speed standpoint, they handle the wideouts in this league, and then from an interior standpoint, how they handle like the line of scrimmage. So I think they've got a lot of talent. JT Clark was a player I signed at Houston before Dana Holgerson took over, and they parted ways at that point. He got out of his NLI and re-signed with UTSA, but he's extremely talented as well. So it'll be a good challenge.
Absolutely. So my last question for you before I switch over to Bill, you talk about recruiting is all about sales. You got the top brands in Texas and Texas A&M in your state. You got Texas Tech and UTSA that have head coaches with tremendous high school experience and a great relationship with the high school coaches in the state. You have Houston, who just made the jump to the Big 12. You have Texas State, who just hired J.J. Keeney and has one of the best passing offenses on college football, as we saw at FCS Incarnate Ward, and also his time as an offensive coordinator. There's so many programs in the state of Texas that are hoping to be kind of the flagship for the state. What makes SMU different, and why should recruits choose the Mustangs over everybody else?
Because who wouldn't want to live in Dallas, rep Dallas, have the entire DFW market behind their back, our alumni behind our back, and bring this team back to a national championship? Who wouldn't want to be a part of that? We just pumped in $120 million end zone facility. So we've shown a commitment to taking this to the next level. We've doubled our staff in just less than a year. And we've had a top 5 transfer class back-to-back years. This is the first time in school history we've had a top 40 overall class in back-to-back years. So this is the most talented roster that we've seen since Eric Dickerson was here. I believe that. And I don't think you can find a better place, program, and university to basically give yourself life insurance. If you make it in football, we're going to have a chance to win a championship. But if you don't like become a All-American or whatever, you're going to make a ton of money because of the people that are in this building, because of the people that prepare you for life after ball, and for the people that are going to be wanting to hire you for a job. So I think it's the easiest sell in the country.
If you don't want to be a Mustang after that, something's wrong with you. Bill, what do you got for our guest?
I have quite a few things. And first of all, you've answered some of my questions already, but you mentioned at one point talking about the relationships you have with some players that you recruited, other places you've been, and even signed other places you've been. And I wanted to get a little bit into that because now, because of the term you use, free agency, right? Because of the transfer portal, you sometimes get a second and maybe even a third bite at the apple. Talk about how you, without doing anything you aren't supposed to do, manage continuing relationships with players you've recruited in the past who may have not initially signed with you, who you might see again at some point.
It's hard because like you want to be able to wish them happy birthday, or like if somebody like passes in their family, like you want to be able to message them, but you're just not allowed to. So I think that's what sucks. Like Donovan Mooten, he was a 3-year starter at Houston, a 2-time all-conference player. Like the minute the season's over, I'm calling him trying to find out how this process is going and how I can help him. He was one of my favorite players to ever recruit. He's with the Colts right now, competing for a backup linebacker spot for them. But it's really difficult, man, because you get so close with these families and these kids, and sometimes they just want to ask you how you're doing. So that's when it gets hard. It's really, really beneficial when a kid does decide to leave. Like you can pick back right where you left off. I've had a lot of conversations with guys that we didn't even have a spot for, but because I had that prior relationship, or he was a former player of mine, I'm able to say like, hey, what are you looking for? Let me see if I can help. And I think what the outside world doesn't realize is how much the recruiting people talk to each other. Like, hey, are you looking for a linebacker? I don't have a spot. Do you have one? I've got a guy. That happens way more than you would think. So it's really difficult. And I feel for the kids, but I understand why it's the case. It's definitely like a conflict of interest. So it was funny. We had a THSCA coaching convention, so the High School Coaching Association for Texas, and it's like a 2 to 3 day convention that's very similar to AFCA. And I can't tell you how many of my former players are now high school coaches or working at high schools that I was able to run into, and it's the first time I'm able to talk to them in a while. And it's really fun. That honestly is the coolest part, is seeing one of your guys that went through the process of recruitment to playing ball to having a successful career. It's just so fulfilling, and it makes it so worthwhile. Like Derek King is on our coaching staff. He's one of our quality control coaches. Yeah. And his first week we have an official visit, and we're on like at the penthouse of the W Hotel overlooking the skyline with some recruits and families. And I look over like, dude, this is crazy. Like literally 8 years ago, I was at an OV with you in Houston, and now we're here. So that's definitely the rewarding part of this job.
And that's the one place where I can I've been doing what I do long enough to be talking to people who were beginning their collegiate careers or in their collegiate careers, who are now sometimes ways into their college coaching careers or pro coaching careers. And it's so funny to run into them at a pro day when I was at their pro day, which to me seems like yesterday, but it probably really wasn't. I am excited about the next few questions I get to ask you, because they're questions that have been burning. So way back, well, it's not that far back, but during the COVID-19 pandemic, I was like in your ear a lot, because I noticed you had to do with your job still, but you had to do your job differently. Looking at what you learned, what things happened, what things have stayed, like some of those things were temporary workarounds, but what things have you kept that you learned from doing your job during the COVID-19 pandemic?
God, that is a great question. What have we kept? You can get so much on a kid just through looking through their social media. I think we got better at information gathering in college football recruiting, whether that's the recruiting services that, Tracking Football, Z-Recruit, the different companies that compile data for us, the verification of measurables and getting video footage of workouts, not just waiting until you see them in person, like getting as much video of live workouts as you possibly can. And then the Zoom component, especially for the onboarding process, because a lot of times, you feel like you have meetings to have meetings. And when it came to the onboarding process for signees and guys who are just joining you, that first couple of days it's brutal. Like you have to go from conference to conference and you sit down and you meet with all these people and they give you a spiel and give you a bunch of paperwork and you go to the next one, you go to the next one. And it's like we're dragging those guys for a whole week. So now, like our Life After Ball program director, Lisa Rollins, she puts together a Zoom call before they even move on campus, and they cover things like Title IX or campus relations or academics or whatever. Like you check off all of those people that they need to meet with and the things that they need to know before they come on campus, so that when they get here, they're focused on moving in. They're focused on meeting their new teammates. They're focused on figuring out where everything's located instead of having to go from meeting to meeting. So I think the Zoom aspect, the communication aspect, and the way we gather information, I think those are areas where we've all improved.
Okay. I would like to also to hit upon the future. Obviously, COVID-19 helped kick some things into the future in terms of how you do certain things. There's always been a selectively permeable membrane between quote unquote the Power Five and quote unquote Group of Five, and that membrane has grown more and more permeable. I mean, literally, in that schools that were very recently quote unquote Group of Five are now Power Five, and also I see more exchange of players, coaches, everything. In terms of how you look at your program, which is clearly on some people's watch list or whatever term you're going to say of the next to join, fill in the blank of conference. With that in mind, what do you think will happen to the relationship between Group of Five, Power Five, and do people make too much of the difference?
Yeah, I think people make too much of it. The only conferences that have like started to turn into super conferences are the SEC and the Big Ten. Call a spade a spade. Like to say that everything's equal is to be ignorant. But at the same time, like what are all these conferences going to look like in 2 years from now when said schools are supposed to move into them? Like we don't even know what it's going to look like in a year from now. So anybody who says, "Oh, this team is going there, this team's going to this conference," that's not on one of the boards, they're just lying to you. I honestly find out the information just like y'all do on Twitter. So I'm as curious to find out as anybody. What's great is if we stay in this conference, we have a pure path to the playoff each and every season. And I think this is the first year in a long time that SMU can truly compete for a championship in the conference and earn a New Year's Six bowl. I think 6 of the last 8 years, the New Year's Six bowl has been a AAC team. That Group of Five automatic qualifier has been a AAC team. One of those being the 15 team that I was part of, and this is the best team that I've been on since that 2015 season. So I think we've got a clear path to what we want to do, is just compete for a national championship. So whether we're in the Pac or AAC or the Big 12 or the Big 10 or any of the Power Five conferences or the AAC, our future is in our hands. Like we can create our own success. So the AAC has been an awesome conference. I've had a great time with the places that we go to, with the support that we get. So if we stay in the AAC, I'm cool with that.
Okay. And wherever you go, conference-wise, or if you stay, you still will be in Dallas-Fort Worth. And you made allusion, not just allusion, you kind of painted a beautiful picture of why it's such a great and powerful position to be in. You have certain advantages. You talked about how that works for you in the recruitment side. How does that work for you in the operations side? There's an NFL team not far from you. There's some of the best known orthopedic, hospitals in that part of the country are not far from you. When you are not just selling a player on it, but when you're thinking about why you work where you work, what are some of the things that you've noticed that help you to be good at what you do about living and working in the Dallas-Fort Worth area?
So I just moved to Farmers Market area. And if you've never been there, you should definitely check it out. So
I'll visit.
Has been around for a long, long time, and they redeveloped the area. There's all these different vendors that come in and bring, whether it's fresh produce, fresh, like there's a barbecue spot that's really, really good. It's called Dean's Barbecue. Definitely give them a shout out because it's really good. They've got all sorts of like drinks you can go get. They've got, fresh coffee, whether it's people that, whatever. They sell all sorts of type of things. I literally can walk out of my apartment. I'm right there. I'm 7 minutes from campus. I'm 5 minutes from downtown. I'm 5 minutes from Deep Ellum, which is a classic Dallas area. I'm 5 minutes away from the Mavericks, American Airlines Center. You've got Dallas Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, where I'm from, where my wife is from. You've got the Texas Rangers, who are one of the best teams in the MLB right now, right down the road in Arlington, right by my parents, right by my wife's family. You have Frisco, which is the home of the Cowboys, and will be the home of the Shrine Game, led by my former colleague Eric Galco. Shout out Eric. But now, like, if they have anybody drop out, who's going to get the first call for an emergency backfill? It's going to be SMU. It's going to be us because we're right down the road. Or I hope it is. I hope I've built up enough equity.
Equity with Eric Galco. Yes.
Equity with Eric Galco. But everything's right here. And what I actually love too is like all the places you can go running. Like running's a big hobby of mine, and like White Rock Lake's super beautiful. The Trinity River's right here. There's tons of places in Arlington that I grew up in, so I feel at home. So I said that about recruiting, but I think that applies to everything. Like you need to feel comfortable where you're at. You need to feel like not necessarily you have a reprieve from your work, but like you can separate the two things. Like you have your work life and you have your home life, and you're able to really like center yourself and be there for your family and also be there for your work people. And I think a lot of that comes from being in the right headspace. And I feel like I can do that here. So.
Well, first of all, yes. Once again, shout out to Eric Galco because he deserves to be shouted out. I feel great having been able to sort of watch the two of you, succeed like crazy.
You brought us together.
I know. I was one of my matchmaker.
Yeah.
But yes, and I'm very proud of that. I am. I'm actually super, super proud of it. You've said some great things, obviously, about the Dallas Fort Worth area, and you don't. This isn't something you've had. We may have worked on it or not. I don't know. You're a manic preparer, but it closed. You closed me, so Brock and I will be coming to visit. Just so you know.
Good.
So yeah, we're coming. We are so coming. Here I want to hit a little bit about SMU. I'm old enough to remember when SMU was a member of the Southwest Conference. I'm old enough to remember when it was one of the top 2 or 3 programs in the nation. Obviously, I'm way older than some of the parents you're dealing with, let alone the players. When you are dealing with young people who have trouble remembering, the days before TikTok, do you spend any time sort of talking about history, or do you just talk about present and future when you're talking to young players nowadays?
That was a really deliberate approach by Coach Lashley last year, where we said same pony, new express. Our intro video for the entire season was Craig James and Eric Dickerson getting into a brand new Ford Mustang and driving through the city of Dallas. Craig's been a great friend of the program. He's been in a bunch of games. He's followed us all through last fall camp. Eric's been incredible, just from the support and the constant communication with Coach Lashley through everybody on those teams. I feel like we've done a great job of involving them because let's just call it what it is. Like when there was the death penalty, this program and the people that were involved with it at that time really distanced themselves from that entire team. And it really wasn't those players' fault. It was the system was what it was. And they were really taken advantage of. If anybody in college football was offered free money and can play and represent the city of Dallas, like which college kid wouldn't do that? You're looking at it right now across the country with NIL. So now that it's legal, like we're going to embrace those people, and we want to know what made that team so special. And it was the defense was top 5 back-to-back years.
Yep.
it wasn't just Eric Dickerson and a run game that was just elite. That was a complete team of dominant players with a mentality that they were going to beat the hell out of people. So that's the first thing that I would say to that. I think it's important to point back to, like, for us as a goal for our team, we reiterate it constantly that it's been over 40 years since we've been to the championship game and been in a college football championship. So we have done it before, and we have done it in an environment that we're kind of looking at right now. Why not us? We have all the resources that we need to make this happen. We have the talent right now. We have the coaches. We have the people in the building in place. So it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, I'm excited. I am excited on several different levels. I'm going to ask you to put on your general manager hat, not just for your program, but as if you were like an NFL general manager, right? You're looking at the conference, including obviously your school, but as a whole. There's players that you're excited about. Some of them are right there on your campus, but I know you well enough to know that you know everybody, all the players everywhere. Tell me who I should be looking out for in the AAC and why. Who are some of the players and even programs that have caught your eye?
Yeah, obviously everyone keeps talking about Michael Pratt. Michael Pratt is a awesome kid, and he's extremely tough. We offered him when I was at Rice. Jerry Mack was our quarterback coach at the time, and he went and saw him play, and he was like, the guy doesn't have the best arm, but he can make all the throws, and he is going to be a fearless competitor, which that has shown up. And I think the improvements in his accuracy and like feel for the game and like ability to make plays in high pressure situations, high leverage situations, it translates, whether or not that's like a high end starter or if he's just a really, really good backup. He's going to be probably a draftable guy for teams. Frankie Harris, we've already talked about him.
I'm such a fan.
For me, so when I got your email, like 4:55, 5 o'clock, I saw the part where you were asking about like who am I excited about that I've watched, and it's actually a lot of players that like transferred. Like this is starting to turn into like a big transfer league, and it's interesting to see who goes where, because it's like Memphis and UTSA have kind of carved out a niche in the JUCO world, whereas like our team, Tulane, FAU did a really good job in the transfer portal. So one guy I'm excited about is Casey Thompson reuniting with Tom Herman. So he's a great fit for that offense. Obviously, he's had injuries that have kind of derailed his career, but he's one that I'm interested in. And there's just so many guys on my team. It's hard to just pick one. Jordan Curley is somebody that he's a freak athlete. Like this guy's going to run a 4.3, maybe faster. He's going to be a 40-inch vert guy. He's going to be a borderline 11-foot broad. So just turn on the tape and watch him run by people because he's really special. And we've got a room full of those types of guys. So you're not going to pin me down with that one.
That's okay. I wasn't trying to pin you down. I was trying to pick your brain. One, because I respect you, as you know. I think you're a terrific evaluator. And two, I do like to see, just how well you've practiced how to give the great non-answer answer. And you're getting very good at it.
Ridiculously good at it, man.
I want to hit on a couple of positions on your roster. Now, a lot of quote-unquote, spread them and shred them offenses don't even have a tight end, but you have some interesting tight ends to me. I'm going to ask you about Michael Hills. I'm going to ask you about Cam Allen, Gage Haskins, and then particularly about Nolan Matthews Harris and also RJ Maryland. Tell me about the tight end position, how you guys evaluate it, what you think it is, because for some teams, it's basically just a big wide receiver. What is a tight end in your offense, and how do you find them?
Yeah, so multi-position, multi-sport. That's something that we always talk about. We say multi-sport from a high school standpoint, like you want guys that are projectable because if he's a good tight end right now and he plays inline tight end and he has all the size measurables that you look for, everybody in the country is going to recruit him, right? So it's like finding a needle in a haystack of one that's, actually recruitable. So you have to really get creative in the type of player that you look at, that you're projecting, whether that's a receiver that kicks inside that has the frame, or a shorter guy, or whether the guy plays more defense than he plays offense on tape, or if he's a basketball kid who didn't play much until his senior year. So that's kind of how we approach it from a recruiting standpoint. We want the most athletic, coordinated, physical, tough guys. So you really are checking off a ton of critical factors because there's so much on that kid's plate, from the run game standpoint, from the pass game standpoint, even from the protection standpoint. So they know how to release, whether they're in line or their hip alignment, or if they're in the slot. So RJ Maryland's really special. He came in as a true freshman and impacted our team in a huge way. Was one of our top receivers. Just has a knack for finishing at the catch point, and he's extremely athletic. Obviously, his dad, Russell Maryland, had a career in the NFL.
Familiar with,
and you see the genes. What's great about the room right now is we have kind of like a basketball lineup of different talents and abilities. We brought in a ton of young guys, so we brought in 3 freshmen: Adam Moore, Lonnie Johnson, Trip Reardon, really talented guys. Adam from Miami, Florida. He's a guy that staff had evaluated for a little while when they were at Miami, and we were on, and so were a lot of people. So we had to beat a bunch of people for him. Lonnie Johnson joined us mid-year, converted. He played running back, quarterback, receiver in high school. So he's more of like just an athlete that is going to be learning the position. Trip Reardon is a big, long, athletic joker, like 35-inch vertical type, 6'4", 235. He's actually 240s now, but like a guy who, from a frame standpoint, looks the way you want, and he has the tools and has shown the ability to block, catch. And then from the older guys standpoint, so like Nolan's a little bit more. Nolan and Micah are the 2 veterans of that crew. You need guys like that can do all of it. So they're kind of more of those blocker types, but what we take a lot of pride in is making sure those guys can play all the positions. So we took Micah because he had a lot of experience. He's a great kid. Loved meeting him on his visit. Definitely a professional. Gage has proven that he can be a guy who can step in and really contribute. And at the end of the day, like, we know that we're deep at that position. So if we want to play with 2 tight ends, if we want to go with 3, like we have the ability to do a lot from a personnel standpoint. So
another position that is interesting to me, and it's sort of an analog to some extent on the other side of the ball, is the bandit. There's the hybrid defender, overhang. Everyone has sort of different terms like to throw around about this player, who sometimes comes down the box, sometimes is going in coverage, might be in the middle of the field, might be out in the slot, might be all the way outside, sometimes even some situations in the flat in some situations. One, how do you evaluate that position in terms of what you want and maybe even what you don't want from players that play that position? And how do you spot them? Like, how do you know when you found one?
Yeah, that is a great question. I was actually talking with one of our quality control coaches yesterday and our defensive coordinator, because me, like, I'm big on critical factors, position specifics, really being detailed in what we want at each of those positions. But because it's such a hybrid linebacker DN spot, we evaluate all the best linebackers and we evaluate all the best defensive ends. And then after we've built the board, we kind of cherry pick through both of those boards right next to each other and say, okay, this guy has true pass rush ability. Let's slide him in here. Because the most important thing is what? Getting to the quarterback. So that's what we prioritize in that position. So lower body bend, ability to turn the corner, what is their redeeming quality as a pass rusher? Can they dominate off the edge? So that guy does play in space, but the job is setting edges and getting to the quarterback. So that's what we look for. We really focus on, let's evaluate all the defensive ends and all the linebackers and then figure out who needs to play that spot. So it's hard. It's definitely Those two are probably two of the hardest positions to evaluate because so much of it is a projection.
Yeah, and a lot of times it seems to be those positions where you get those late bloomers a lot too,
Yep.
where a guy that people, I mean, DeMarcus Ware was a 186-pound possession receiver, right? That ends up at Troy and becomes DeMarcus Ware, and so we see stories like that. Jimmy Graham was a basketball player, basically, pretty much all throughout high school and even much of his time in college. Okay, I have just a couple more questions for you, and I would like to dig a little into your philosophy mindset. You mentioned tracking football, and I'm a fan as well. I think that when I can remember sort of when the term recruiting service first came into vogue, like the first time anyone talked about it was probably late 70s, early 80s, you heard about recruiting services. And they were usually small regional operations initially. Now, of course, there's these large national operations. When you were evaluating how to make use of things like, metrics, measurables, statistical analysis, in addition to what your eyeballs and being around football since you were, I don't know, 6 or whatever age it was that you and the game found each other. How do you weigh out those things? How do you stack those things when you're figuring out our approach, our philosophy to evaluating these players? How do you weight it, and how does it change, or has it changed over time? How you do it?
So Pirates of the Caribbean. Like
Wait, say that again.
Pirates of the Caribbean. The scene with Johnny.
Yes, Pirates of the Caribbean. Yes.
So and Johnny Depp's like getting captured, and he's like parlay, and he says parlay, and they're like, what? And he's like, the code, and he's like, okay, so all right, that's his get out of jail free card, and he goes to Barbosa, like the main bad guy, and he says the code thing, and he's like, the code. No, it's more like a guideline. That's kind of how you have to approach metrics with high school kids, especially when you're thinking about the context. Because let's just talk about a for instance, right? I'm looking at a high school sophomore that's going into his junior year. One is 5'11", 180 pounds, 178 pounds, running a 4.47 laser 40. Sounds pretty damn good. Like, that's an explosive athlete. There's another kid who's 6'2" and some change. He's 172, has a really good vertical, like a 34-inch vertical or something like that, but he ran a 4.8. Now, in a vacuum, which one do both y'all take? Brock, which one do you take?
Right.
Brock, which one do you take? Sophomore.
Yeah, 4.8's a hard sell for most.
Yeah,
Okay. I ran 4.8. That's why I can't get excited about it.
So
the issue is I would have to see his tape to see if there's any type of
no.
That's what in a vacuum means, Brock. You don't get to see the tape.
I said vacuum.
I tried to pull the Alex Brown cop out, and and that is why I'm in a home office and not in the SMU facility.
So I take the 4.48 guy. The 4.8 guy is Justin Jefferson.
Oh shit!
So what's important about the whole thing is, okay, relative to that position, what are we looking at? So what we did is Grant Heisers was one of our student workers last year. He just finished his grad degree in like statistical analysis and analytics or some sort of crazy genius major. And he took the last 5 years of data from the All-Americans, the all-conference players, starters, and backups in our conference, all their measurables from when they were in high school as sophomores and juniors, and basically built out ranges, medians, thresholds from a height, weight, speed, shuttle, 40 time, vert, broad jump, what track times are relative to it. So now I can legitimately put a grading scale number based on if he is all-American talent, does he have all conference talent, does he have starter ability or backup ability from a threshold standpoint. So that's a real starting point, especially for the frontline workers of our staff that we treat as like the identification process. So Their job isn't to say yes or no to a kid as far as we're going to take them, we're not going to take them. Their job is to cut the wheat from the chaff. So we use the metrics and the measurables to funnel a list of, tens of thousands of kids to hundreds of kids, or maybe a couple thousands of kids. Really, you want to chop it down to less than 1,000. And then now at that point, we're evaluating guys that have the tools that history has shown that these guys can be X type of players. The film then supplements and becomes the evaluation of what exactly this guy is for us. So we get rid of the exceptions. In rare cases, if like the film is so good you can't ignore it, like a De'Aaron King, or like for instance, like Cam Pettisclo, who just transferred from ULL to Tulane. Like he's a very tiny safety, but he is a hell of a football player. Those are different scenarios. So I think you use it as a filter. It's part of the funnel. If you don't have funnels, you can't be successful in recruiting. So there's just too many guys to go through.
Yeah, no, I can't. I mean, I am doing maybe 400, 500 players a year at the collegiate level, and it is almost killing me. I can't even imagine what it must be like to look at hundreds of thousands of possible. I mean, it's so daunting. I don't know how you do. Hats off once again to you and everyone who does what you do. I have a last couple of questions, so I'll ask them. That's what I'll do. That makes sense to do. You have
a way with words, man.
I try. And plus, I enjoy your company, obviously. So, you obviously in a very interesting position. You get a chance to look back on the work you've done in the past. You're looking at your handiwork that as you've brought it to this point, and then obviously projecting out towards the future. You get to, sort of your whole job to some extent is trying to predict the future about looking at who this person is. Looking at, I know you're no longer a draft Twitter guy, so to speak, but you know who the guys who are Sunday guys in the AAC are. I'm not asking you to go through an exhaustive list, but you also have been a pro liaison, right? Scouts come and talk to you. You know what they're looking for. Who are some of the names that would come off your lips when a scout comes to talk to you about your conference?
My players.
Well, yes, that's a good place to start.
Wow.
No, he's right. Let's start with SMU. SMU has some guys who can play on Sunday. Tell me about them and why you believe they will play on Sunday.
Yeah, so I told you about Jordan Curley. Justin Osborne's a really easy one to get excited about if you're a scout, because he's shown the ability to play tackle, guard, center at a high level. He's overcome a ton in his life personally, even on the field from the injuries that he's overcome. But he is a very wide human being, like broad shoulder, powerfully built, but he's got suddenness, twitch, can move, can pull. So he makes a lot of sense. He's a guy that we're really excited about. Charles Woods, who transferred in from West Virginia.
Yes.
He's probably one of the more complete players just in terms of like football knowledge, football savvy. He really frustrated our guys in the spring. Just the ability to pattern read, to read releases, to be a really instinctive cover player that has a feel for the position. So those are some guys right off the top. And then Jonathan McGill is somebody I mentioned earlier, but just in terms of like the makeup, and you see more smaller DBs than ever before, I think, in the NFL, because the way the game's changed from a physicality standpoint, like what's the most important thing? It's covering the pass or getting to the quarterback. So are you smart enough to play the game? Are you athletic enough to cover people? And can you tackle in space? So those are guys that bump off the top, and we'll probably have like 5 to 6 more guys that if they have a season that they want to have and need to have, they're going to have a chance to be drafted as well. So those are guys right off the top. I haven't fully gotten into my entire advance updates.
Got it.
A lot of our evaluations go through August, leading up to when we play these guys. So you'll have to get me back on the show. Maybe.
Don't you threaten me with a good time? Don't you threaten me with a good time? Obviously you want to win football games. That's kind of why everybody's there. But I want to know how you personally measure success in what you do beyond just simply wins and losses, because I mean, the whole program is built around that, wins and losses. But also there's other things that do with development of your staff, development of individual players, because you are not just a general manager, you also a senior director of player personnel, senior director of player personnel at Southern Methodist University. So that means more than just evaluating who people are as football players, but who they are as people and things like that. So how do you define success? What are the principles that you use to define success in your role?
Yeah. What I've learned over the last 4 years is the thing that gives me the most pride in my work is seeing guys go from working with me to getting bigger and more expanded roles, whether that's elsewhere or here. So if I can help the current version of my volunteer self, like I really take a lot of pride in helping guys see their career dreams pan out, because a guy named Adrian Mays and a guy named Dallas Blacklock believed in me at Houston. I wouldn't say that's the entirety of how I view success, but that's my job. My job is to make sure that we have a really, really incredible staff. So the most important people that I evaluate are the people that I bring into the building to work with me. And I don't say for, I say with, because we're all on the same thread. This past year was the first year that I had somebody get an NFL scouting opportunity. So Justin Marcus, he's now a West Coast scout with the Giants. He finished up a scouting assistant year and just got promoted. So that's what success looks like. Like Jeremiah Waite volunteered all of last year and he got promoted to a full-time role, assistant director of college scouting. Brian Filker, he was a volunteer, got a GA job here. I think that's what I take the most pride in is helping guys succeed. And I want to win a championship. Like point blank, like I won a ring my first year in college football and I have not won one since. I don't count that as like, okay, that's the, binary, definition of success for me personally. Like, I think for me, this is an opportunity to get better at managing a whole department. And I don't know what success looks like because it's so different than when I started in recruiting. So what I'm focused on is really making sure that I'm ahead and just getting better year to year.
Excellent. I'm going to check with Brock because I know he's been quiet longer than he likes. Did you have anything else you wanted to fire at the one, the only Mr. Alex M. Brown?
Absolutely. I want to get into the football talk. So I cover the UNLV football very closely. And when I first started, that was when Marcus Arroyo was there. And the director of player personnel there, I think, was someone that you know pretty well in Guy Skid Crowley.
Yeah.
And both those guys and this whole staff did an incredible job recruiting. At the seasons, we would have high in class and never really developed on the field in terms of success. What about Coach Lashley and this coaching staff makes you believe that not only do you guys have the firepower on paper, that you guys are going to have the firepower every Saturday when you guys take the field?
About our coaching, you cut out a little bit on that.
Sorry. No, what have you seen when in regards to the program and coaching staff that is going to bridge the gap between having great players on paper and having that translate to wins on Saturday?
They've done it. Like Coach Lashley's had one of the best offenses in the country every single time he's had a team like this. Even going back to Auburn when they, went to a national championship and won one. So him and Coach Woods know what that looks like. Coach Likens has had a ton of success as an offensive coordinator. Watching Garen Justice, my next door neighbor, my next door office neighbor, coach and develop the offensive line is really a joy because he's such a teacher of the position. And he approaches it the right way. Like he really cares about his players. He understands how to connect individually with them in a way that is very unique to offensive line coaches, where you think of them as like this, just gritty or like angry, just yellers. He is so good at making sure that the concepts go from the classroom to the field, and he can teach it on the field because he's done it. Like, he was a all conference offensive lineman for West Virginia, like a big time player. We do what's called the Garin test. Like, if the guy stands next to him and looks really tiny, we're not going to probably recruit him as a tackle because Garin is 5, 6, 6 or whatever. If they're close to his height, like, all right, we're going to be all right. Keenan Hall, he's developed guys like James Robinson at Illinois State, and so many others, and how he approaches his craft and how he connects with his players. It's really incredible to watch. And then on the defensive side, like, all of those guys just have such a good, thorough plan. I think what we did a good job of this spring was really focus on the fundamentals of like covering and like tackling, and just really being elite at what we do from a base standpoint, and really nailing down the fundamentals, because we have such a new team. So having seen the success that these guys have had and seeing how they've connected with our players, I think the connection with the players is what sells me on why, like, I believe in the staff.
Absolutely. So going towards your section of the job and recruit, especially the transfer portal, SMU is going to play at Oklahoma during the second week of the season. Head coach for Oklahoma, Brent Venables, made some comments about Coach Deion Sanders and the transfer portal and his approach to it. We talked about it last week on this show. Being that you're a guy that literally lives it every single day, do you think the comments made by Coach Venables was accurate, or do you have some type of opinion about it?
Yeah, I actually didn't see what he said, so I actually don't have anything to say on him.
Fair enough. Well,
Nicely done, Alex. Nicely done. All that media training has paid off.
I was about to say, like, a political advisor might be your next like role if you don't want to do football anymore. Like, this has been like zero bulletin board material while being very excellent and very factual and very knowledgeable. Well done. Moving into the actual season itself, you guys start out with against Louisiana Tech. Obviously play your non-conference opponents. You guys will play Charlotte at home, who is preseason ranked as, I think, the last team in the conference. At East Carolina, at Temple, Tulsa, at Rice, North Texas, at Memphis, and then you finish up at home home against Navy. That's a lot of winnable football games, in my opinion, especially with the players that you got. Why should SMU fans believe that this year is the year Mustang football gets back to where it's supposed to be?
Show up game one, we play La Tech, and we'll show you.
Ha! There we go. Ooh. I'm excited about the Alex Brown Bowl and the Alex Brown Bowl tool.
I'm really excited about that. So I am really looking forward to that. That's actually a trip my wife's going to make because she has a ton of friends down there when she was teaching. And I already have like my running routes and everything from when I worked there. So I got my coffee shop. Houston's a second home now. So that'll be fun. It'll be fun seeing them. A lot of good people over there.
Yep.
So actually, I want to touch on that real quick. I was talking about football and everything, but what we don't talk about is the lifestyle. And obviously, you got to be a very committed individual to be successful in this game and to have a position like yours. As a person who is constantly, working in an environment which you do, but you also have a wife and personal responsibilities, how do you find the time to kind of manage everything and, be available in all aspects of life?
You gotta keep a really good calendar. You have to make intentional choices with when you go to bed, when you wake up, when you're home, like putting the phone away. I think that's something that leading up to COVID, I was really bad about. Like I would take a phone call from a recruit or a coach while I was walking in the house, and maybe my wife would have dinner ready, and I wouldn't think anything of it. I would just be like, oh, cool, she has dinner ready. I'm going to finish this phone call. And it's basically like, oh, you really weren't looking forward to spending time with me. You want to keep working. So I have this new rule. I started this rule back when I was in Houston. I'm going to finish. If I'm on the phone, I'm going to finish that call before I go in the house. But how do you do that? First is like just little decisions. Like, so Bill sends me the time. He said 7 o'clock work, and I was like, hey, can we do it at 5? So that now at 6:30, I'll leave. I'll get home at around 7. I can have dinner with my wife. You know what I mean? So it's like little decisions like that where it may be an hour here or 2 hours here, but or like a quarter of the day on Saturday because you had to work part of it. But when you have that time, like you're fully present there, and you're not distant, like you're not on your phone, you're not think like it's hard to not think about work, especially in this. But once you make like an intentional choice about that on a day-to-day basis, you really look for the times that you can, you know, make make your partner feel special.
Absolutely. And
I hope you had your
choices.
notebook out, Brock. I hope you took some careful notes.
Don't worry, it's recorded, so I have a reference. That's the main thing. You talk about making choices, intentional choices, and obviously, as a recruiting, organization, well, as an organization that constantly recruiting, you have to evaluate prospects in a variety of ways, as you previously mentioned. What are some of the choices that you see high school prospects or even transfer portal players make that may end up harming them in the recruiting process?
Um, Going to the biggest logo. Um, I think that's harmful. Not doing their homework, um, not thinking through the entirety of what a college decision means. Like, what's your support system going to be? Do they have people that are really going to look out for you outside of ball? Um, is it a place that you want to actually live in? Because 9 times out of 10, the guys that we're recruiting in the transfer portal from Texas are just homesick and they miss their families. Um, I mean, our starting block is guys from Texas, but I think high school wise, there's a two things. One of them is when the kid is, I'm going to make the decision on my own. I'm going to make the decision on my own, and don't take in family advice or don't take in like mentor advice because they've lived a lot of life. Like they have like real wisdom to share with you. And as a 17, 18-year old, this is a big time decision. Like we've you've had somebody helping you grow up. Like yes, you're about to be a grown man, but you're not yet. Like it's kind of hard to take in whether it's NIL or handlers or your high school coach who has, maybe he has an agenda, or maybe your uncle just comes into the picture because he sees you as like somebody that can be really successful. There's all these different factors for different kids. And why would you change your support group at the last minute? Like, I know I can count on my dad, but when it comes time to make a decision, I'm gonna go ask my uncle. Like, nothing against my uncle, but like he hasn't been there for me this whole time. Or I'm gonna trust my high school coach all the way up until this point, and then because there's this shiny new toy, I'm gonna go that direction. So there's a lot of like blanket promises across college football that I'd warn kids about, especially when it comes to like NIL, because there's a lot of people that are involved in that space that I'm not allowed to talk about it with recruits as like an inducement for a player, but you'd be ignorant not to know that's what's going on behind the scenes. So how much of that's real? How much of that's just BS that people are pumping into these kids' ears? So um, I think that's probably the biggest thing is like dropping your mentorship and your support people, whether that's family, coach, or whoever that may be in your life, and then handling the noise of like NIL because that's really hard. Like I don't know how I would handle it as a high school kid. So I can't imagine what these guys are going through right now.
Absolutely. What have you been? This has been an education to say the least, and
Yes.
I really appreciate you kind of giving us a deep dive into what it's like to be in your position, what it's like to be in the thick of things in terms of college football, and just seeing where SMU is the program, and you have completely sold me on Coach Lashley, the Mustangs this year, and I wish you guys nothing but success. The last question that I have for you is that right now in the American Conference, there's a lot of young coaches. I would say 80% of them have been at the program under 5 years. Coach Lashley is entering his second year. Do you think that he is, how should I put this, the most prepared to take that next jump up into being an elite coach in college football? Do you think he's already there, or what do you think about him in terms of his scheme, his recruiting, and just how he manages a program at a head coaching role?
I think we've done everything we possibly can to position ourselves to take that next step. And he'd be the first to say that this is the year that we show the country what we're about, what he's about. And this was last year was his first year as a head coach, so there was a lot of learning lessons for us as an entire program. And we restructured some things off the field. We kind of refocused some things on the field. So I think we have positioned ourselves for that to be the case, and now it's time for us to go do it.
Perfect. And then I just thought about this. The word culture always comes up in terms of college football. Coaches coming in, building the culture. And realistically, we'll never get to see the full product until after 3 years, because the coach has to come in, he has his growing pains, he has to bring in recruits, establish his own culture. But could you briefly describe the culture that Coach Lashley has instilled here at SMU?
Yeah, it's tough, together, united. That's some stuff that we really harp on. We have a really tied in team. That's the best way I can put it.
Perfect. Well, like I said, I wish you guys luck. Love the direction team's going. Love the players that you guys got and brought in. Looking forward to seeing you guys let up the scoreboard some more. Bill, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I obviously, like I said, I'm not going to pretend to be objective when it comes to Alex Brown. I have a little bit of this going. A little. I'm like that black uncle that you didn't know you had, who's always been rooting for you from meeting you all those years ago. My final, and it's not even so much. Well, I guess it's sort of a question. You keep getting better at what you do. 1 year from now, if we come back a year from now, what are some of the things you'd like to say you got better at from where you are right now? If we were to come back a year from now, you'd say, hey, I'm proud that I got better at this.
Managing the entire department and being more efficient. That's hard to be efficient in college football. So if we can be a more efficient unit from a day-to-day standpoint, that's something that I've really wanted to focus on this year, on a day-to-day standpoint, because we get pulled in so many different directions on a constant basis. Like the outcome is, we're going to make sure the outcome is good. But I want to get better at the process, whether it's how we evaluate the film or how we train the scouts or how we train our recruiting interns to handle a visit. There's just a lot of people. And this is the first time I've had a staff that I've been able to have a real influence on who we hired and how we positioned them and how we built the whole department. So this is a little bit like, Rhett Lashley had his first head coaching year last year. I have my first GM year this year. So it's a completely different world than last year. Last year I was just watching players. So it's that's what I want to get better at is managing our team. My team, and the recruiting.
Yes. Yeah. Right. I knew what you meant. And I'm going to make a little bit of a prediction. I have a feeling that when we come back in a year, you may not be satisfied, but I think that, and we will be back, but I have a feeling you will have grown in that area because you keep growing. And one of the reasons that your black uncle is so proud of you. So, yeah, maybe I should stop throwing that little term around. The more I say it, the worse it sounds.
I'm going to change you in my phone to my black uncle.
I have opened a can of worms and now I must eat it, but much to my chagrin. On behalf of Team MBS Sports, the babyface assassin Brock Vieira, well, that way, the babyface assassin Brock Vieira, and of course, I just want to say it has been a distinct honor, a privilege, and a pleasure. For those that have not checked out, okay, this is not a question. Tell people, not even a question, just tell people about your amazing podcast. I forgot to mention the podcast. Tell people about Up Close and Personnel. The fans need to know.
If you want to get a up close and personal view of college football recruiting and really player personnel across sports, whether that's football, baseball, anything, definitely tune in to Up Close and Personnel, where we've interviewed different recruiting directors, coaches, staff members, from college baseball to NFL to former NFL to current college and beyond, even book authors that were tied in with MLB teams. You're going to get a deep dive and learn kind of the ins and outs of how people approach their job, what fires them up, what inspires them, and a little bit of inside of kind of my experiences in college football and what I've learned. So it was a fun 1.5-year project. I wish I had the time still that COVID allowed for that, but all the episodes are running. There's 56 of them. They're titled for different aspects of whether it's player personnel or scouting or recruiting, you name it, it's on there. So look for a title that excites you and tune in.
I have listened to some of them more than once. Jake Longing, particularly, I think I've listened to this episode 2 or 3 times. He's an amazing story. But yeah, I'm going to revisit some of my favorites. Once again, Alex, I thank you so much for your time. I thank you so much for your attention and for your talent. Please give a big, warm hug to your wife and one of my favorite people in the world, the lovely Brittany. It is always a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege. Oh, and Brock, you can say goodnight as well.
Yes, good night, everyone. Don't have technical issues as much as you have.
Once again, thank you so much. I don't know how we're going to top this one. Thank you, Alex. Once again, the Senior Director of Player Personnel, General Manager at Southern Methodist University Football Program, a person on the rise in the world of college football and perhaps beyond, question mark. But it is, once again, always a pleasure. We will do this again, and we are OUT out. See us again 1 week with another amazing guest that we haven't booked yet, but I promise you we